The legal limitations that differentiate the JCG in law enforcement duties from the MSDF present some unique challenges to cooperation. When a situation at sea escalates to a threat to Japan's survival, the JCG is supposed to evacuate and allow the MSDF to take control of the situation. But there is some doubt as to whether the legal framework and the processes of this transition could keep pace with a swiftly escalating incident. Moreover, as the JCG is strictly prohibited from conducting any kind of military activity, the JCG's cooperation with the MSDF, including joint drills on responses to suspicious vessels, has been somewhat limited in the past, though drills have been conducted more frequently in the past couple years. 8. Without more robust exercises, it is unclear how JCG to MSDF transition and partnership would occur in practice during a rapidly escalating situation, or what role the JCG could play in support of the MSDF in a gray zone situation in which the MSDF must take action. Case study: the 2010 Senkaku/Diaoyu boat collision. Date: September 7, 2010. Location: off the coast of the Senkaku/Diaoyu Islands. Incident: a Chinese fishing boat collided with a Japan Coast Guard vessel in the waters near the Senkaku/Diaoyu Islands after the boat ignored an order to stop for inspection. The JCG arrested the captain and detained the crew and vessel. Beijing issued several diplomatic protests to demand the release of the fishing boat and crew, who were released on September 13 and 14. China subsequently stopped rare earth mineral exports to Japan through November 2010. Takeaway: the collision in the waters near the Senkaku/Diaoyu Islands demonstrates the danger of an increasing number of ships in the area, ranging from fishing to military vessels. The dueling narratives from Tokyo and Beijing about how the collision occurred, who was responsible, whether the fishing boat had a right to operate in those waters, and whether the arrests were appropriate also showed the difficulty in managing encounters at sea in disputed waters. The fishing boat's activities are part of a larger Chinese presence around Senkaku/Diaoyu that, when encountering JCG patrols, increases the risk of accidents and miscommunication. However, China's maritime militias complicate the distinction between Coast Guard and Navy activities. This blurry line between law enforcement and military action raises questions about when it is appropriate for a Coast Guard or a Navy to respond to a situation. For example, if a non-Japanese vessel landed on the Senkaku/Diaoyu Islands, the pivotal question for Japan's response is whether the landing is a crime, a law enforcement issue, or an invasion, requiring military response. It is possible that the JCG could face a gray zone incident in which it would need to cooperate closely with the MSDF to determine the correct response and prevent escalation. Finally, the lack of options to respond to gray zone activities presents a challenge for cooperation that seeks to stabilize the region. By their nature, gray zone activities fall below the threshold of military force and may be difficult to identify as isolated incidents or part of a longer-term strategy of attrition to distract, weaken, and confuse. For example, the presence of numerous Chinese sand dredging vessels around Taiwan's outlying islands of Matsu have sometimes entered Taiwan's EEZ, forcing Matsu's Coast Guard and the larger TCG to work overtime to respond. It is difficult to interpret the intentions of the dredgers, whether a deliberate attempt to exert pressure on Taiwan or otherwise. 9. In this and other gray zone incidents, responding with military tools would escalate the situation, but there are few other options at present, especially when gray zone actors cannot be linked with certainty to a state giving orders. This demonstrates the challenge of developing forms of cooperation that can effectively respond to gray zone activities. Case study: the 2022 Chinese missiles fired into Japan's EEZ-10. Date: August 4, 2022. Location: off the coast of Hataruma Island, southwest Japan. Incident: during live-fire exercises conducted by the PLA around Taiwan, in response to the visit of U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, 5 Chinese missiles landed in Japan's EEZ. After Japan issued a diplomatic protest, China argued that Japan and China had not delimited boundaries in those waters, and further argued that China had conducted drills in waters around its sovereign territory, as China claims Taiwan. Takeaway: Japan's effort to resolve the issue of the missiles through diplomatic channels was appropriate. When China rebuffed the diplomatic protest, it revealed an additional problem for settling this kind of dispute in the future. If an actor refuses to acknowledge a violation of norms or law, there is little recourse for the actor seeking a resolution. This illustrates the need for stronger enforcement tools, other than military options, for international norms or laws. In addition, preventing this kind of situation in the future by denying aggressive behavior and de-escalating tense situations is desirable to avoid a challenge to norms and the rule of law. Recommendations. The working group participants identified several recommendations for the United States, Japan, and Taiwan to consider in improving maritime safety cooperation among the three. These recommendations do not necessarily represent the consensus of the group. They do provide, however, a starting point for Washington, Tokyo, and Taipei to establish action plans for concrete cooperation. The United States should take advantage of the bilateral cooperation it shares individually with Japan and Taiwan to spearhead cooperative initiatives, as the U.S. is better able to withstand pressure from China. The United States, Japan, and Taiwan should explore new avenues of cooperation and communication between their 3 coast guards. Cooperation should focus on less politically sensitive and humanitarian issues, such as search and rescue. Law enforcement activities, such as drug interdiction and responding to illegal, unreported, and unregulated IUU fishing, may also be an area for cooperation. Invite China to participate, so long as it does not set preconditions. Communication should prioritize information sharing to improve maritime domain awareness of difficult or dangerous situations. Communication sharing can start with the 3 Coast Guards liaisons. The 3 Coast Guards need to develop a mutual understanding of their missions, authorities, and priorities so that they can better cooperate. Expanding Coast Guard Academy exchanges could provide opportunities for deepening this understanding and building bridges for partnership. Joint exercises and aligning operating procedures, while more sensitive, would be useful forms of concrete cooperation. Consider an agreement between the 3 Coast Guards on maritime cooperation. Expand partnerships with other Coast Guards as well, such as in regions where the 3 partners share diplomatic allies, like the Pacific Ocean. Japan's Coast Guard should seek closer cooperation with the Maritime Self-Defense Forces, in particular regarding the transition from JCG to MSDF control of a situation at sea. The 3 partners should regularize and institutionalize dialogues and other opportunities to encourage communication at the political level. Institutionalize the Taiwan-Japan Maritime Affairs Cooperation Dialogue and the Fishery Cooperation Working Group. Hold regular legislator talks between the Japan and Taiwan ruling parties. Ensure ongoing dialogue with Chinese political leaders to avoid miscalculations, especially during a crisis. The 3 partners should work together to strengthen international norms at sea and raise awareness of maritime safety issues around the globe. Enforce existing norms and rules, including international law. Explore creative, non-military options for responding to gray zone activities, such as diplomacy or sanctions. Establish norms and rules for the gray zone, even if some actors do not participate. Publicize violations of norms or the rule of law to increase awareness, especially among lawmakers. This will also serve as a deterrent to violators. Civil society organizations may help to fill this information gap, such as on maritime law enforcement issues like IUU fishing. Fishing.